Hey, this is David Hayter. You may know me as the screenwriter of films like X-Men, X-Men 2, and Watchmen, but you probably know me best as the voice of Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid. And you're listening to Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. Kept you waiting, huh?
Welcome everyone to another episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. I'm your host, Mikhail Kasanova, and I am joined here today with some very, very special guests. I've got Steve and Carlton of R8 Games. It's such an honor to have you guys on. How are you guys doing today?
It's been an honor for us to be on this show. Thanks very much for the invite. We're doing well, aren't we, Carlton, I think?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Coming to the end of a decent week, and to say the same thing, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. Thank you for having us on.
Thank you. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day. I know it's the end of the work day for you guys, and for the audience, when you guys do get the chance to listen to this and see this, it is, I want to say like 4 p.m. where you guys are, and it's like 6 a.m. where I am. And you guys should be used to this. We I talk to people from all over the world, so like I need 2 hours of sleep. That's all I need, and I'm good to go. Well, I don't know. When the baby comes, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that anymore.
Well, you will get 2 hours of sleep. You're already good.
Oh man. So we're here today. We're going to talk about the game PACER. Is a amazing futuristic racer that's kind of like WipeOut meets F-Zero, and it ticks all the right boxes and then does a whole lot more. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Like before we do that, let me stop being so rude. Let's go ahead and give a background on you guys and your company, how you got started, and how we got here today.
Carlton, do you want to go?
Okay. So background on the company, R8 Games was founded, I think, around 2013, somewhere around there. And this is, I think, the second release. We had Formula Fusion first, then PACER. I joined the company in April 2016, and I've been working on anti-gravity racing my entire time that I've been here. I joined as the designer, so by default I tell everyone I'm the lead designer. It's easy to lead a team of one.
More than that, though, you had a couple of people as well.
Not to denigrate them, there were Corey and Nathan did join for about 6 months, a year and 6 months respectively, and they did some great work on the project as well. If you're listening, hello. Me personally, I've always been into video games. I've always been into in kind of creating systems of play and interaction, even in much more simpler terms. I did games development at college for 2 years, did it at university for 4 years, and this is my first job in industry working with R8.
Nice. All right. And Steve, how about yourself?
I've been in the industry over 20 years. Wow. I go back to the Sinclair Spectrum days. Because when I joined the industry, so yeah, I'm an old fart. So I was approached in a consultant capacity through my business to come in and to help get the project finished. The project started as a PC game, and it since then grew out to be, a PlayStation and an Xbox title as well. It's a very, very tiny team, very young team, and to do that monumental task when none of the original team had that experience. The founders, the investors were like, we need somebody to help us guide through this. Now, when I got in, it was about September 18, I think, and we already had 3 other people. Jason, who was lead artist on the project, he'd been in the industry a long time. Mark as well, who led the optimization of the console versions, along with Chris Hull, Chris is one of the R8 staff, and then Manjit, who was a network specialist, who has again been in the industry, a very long time, worked back on the original WipeOut game. So I think there was only 4 of us in the business that had been in the industry for a very long time. Everyone else, it was either their first product or for Carlton Gaunt had already gone through one cycle with Formula Fusion. Now he's entering his second cycle with PACER. So I've done over 40 plus products, worked on a lot of franchises like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Incredible Hulk and Pirates of the Caribbean, and I've been through many different hardware and software cycles. So this was this was a challenging project, I think, for everybody. But it's been interesting. It's been it's been as much fun as it has been very, very hard work, I think, for the whole team. So trying to get, I think, if you look at the 3 formats we shipped, it wasn't just 3 hardware platforms, because Xbox is 3 on its own. PlayStation is another 2. So we had a team barely big enough to do the PC version, doing 6 versions. So if you know anything about software development, and you look at the amount of people on this project, and then you look at what we've done, it's been mind blowing what they've been able to achieve.
Because I know a lot of people assume that when it comes to, like, if you're developing for one platform and then that platform has a newer iteration, that, you're basically developing the game the same exact way. And it's like, no, they're dev kits. You got to go through a whole different process with that, understand the ins and outs of it.
Yeah. I mean, specifically on the technical side, those that are loosely aware of Unity and Unreal might fall if you think you push a button and it compiles it all and it works on everything. Now, in the most basic sense, that's right. It will work on everything, but it won't work well. And there's a phenomenal amount of work that still needs to be done, because things like the base Xbox, its hardware abilities are nowhere close to the Xbox One X, for example. So there's, that's the easier one. Everything works much quicker because you've got so much more power. But for us, what we were trying to do was achieve 60 frames per second across every hardware platform, including, the base PlayStation and the very first Xbox. And that was a significant amount of work to have to go through and make that happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can assume like the optimization just to have that unity across the board, like, that's time consuming.
Very much so. And you in order for you to do that, in a really efficient way, you kind of need little break-off teams to do each platform, and we never had that. We had one team trying to do everything. So you had like a project management style where you could only really do things in a waterfall way, because you're always up against this barrier of, you had to do, put out the next fire and get that thing right before you could move on to the next thing, because we didn't have big teams to be able to do everything in parallel and then all come together.
Yeah. It's like one of the things when I talk to, a lot of video gamers, they're like, say, for instance, the people that are exclusively using the Nintendo Switch, or they're, they get upset that, okay, how come this game, like, take case in point with Doom Eternal is now going to be coming to the Switch later, and they're like, why couldn't it be day and day? And I'm like, because that's a different platform they have to build the game around. It's not like you snap your fingers and there it is. Like, no, it doesn't work that way.
No, not at all.
there's a whole ton of re-optimization that has to happen for that. So it's like when you're doing the Nintendo Switch version, you're almost doing two platforms, because when you're doing that, you're almost doing your mobile version phone as well, with the power of the mobile phones right now. But we've been looking at a Switch version of PACER, and we have to go through and optimize every single world, every single craft. Nothing can be pulled over and just run.
Yeah. So that's so for the audience there, I hope you guys understand. It is work. It's not just snap your fingers or press an easy button. It takes time. So have some patience.
Life would be so much easier for us developers if that was the case.
So as far as the initial planning stages of PACER, like what was the inspiring idea behind it, or the reasoning to making like another anti-gravity game? Because like we were talking about this, Steve and I were talking about this before we went and started recording, but there's like such gaps between anti-gravity games. I mean, you have your guys' game, you have WipeOut Collection, you have F-Zero GX from like has it been 20 years? No, closing in.
What does that?
GX was 2003, wasn't it? It was like a really early title in the GameCube's lifespan. So it'll be around 2001, 2003. So we're coming up on 20 years.
It does not.
Must be. I'm looking for a date on the clock, and I can't see a date. 2003. Yeah. Seen it.
There we go. So 17 years.
Yeah.
And still just an amazing play.
So it's like, one of my curiosities is like, why is there such gaps between anti-gravity games? But I really want to know, we can dive into that, but I really want to know, like, what was the founding idea of creating PACER? Because it's a really phenomenal game. And I'm not saying that because I'm reviewing it. I'm saying it because I love anti-gravity games. I grew up with it. Like I'm an 80s kid, so.
Well, I think Carlton has used a great phrase in a few other interviews. I think PACER was the studio's love letter, I think, to WipeOut, with what you said in the past, which I think is really great. But I think I came in at a very late stage, so I think it's over to Carlton to give you more of an explanation as to the earlier days, and then we can move on from there. So
I think, like yourself, a lot of us in the development side of it were big fans of things like WipeOut, of the early F-Zero games, of like even the Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Those are like the big anti-gravity racing titles of like mid to late 90s. And like yourself, we grew up playing them. We grew up really enjoying them. It offers an experience other racers don't. When you detach from the floor completely, you can do away with things like gravity. You can do away with things like a solid track. You can do away with concepts like friction, and you can push the speed to ridiculous levels. We grew up with that, and that has kind of fallen a bit in the mainstream. It is a niche avenue. Well, it's a niche of a niche. Racing games are, again, a genre of their own. They have their own diehards. And then you have anti-gravity racing, which is essentially a subgenre. With its own styles. We grew up enjoying them, and as we got older, we are seeing now something of a resurgence in developers that grew up playing them, trying to remake them in their style for others that grew up playing them as well and haven't been as satisfied with a more mainstream offering of them. So that was us. As Steve said, it is our love letter. It is what we experienced. What we remember experiencing when we played them. Because obviously we go back and we play them now, and it looks terrible. The controls are awkward, and the hardware is really difficult to get hold of. But when we played them at the time, it looked absolutely incredible. They were so realistic. It felt like being there, and we want that experience again, but we want to update it and innovate it with 10, 20 years of game development and history that's passed since. So we want to not only be a supersonic spaceship pilot, but we also want to jump under the hood and become a bit of a mechanic and learn how these things work and customize them and tune them. We want to add cool things to it. We want to change how it looks. And this is us saying, yeah, actually, let's do this. Let's give that fantasy.
It's I absolutely love it. Like the amount of customization options that you have, the ability to turn on like collision or be able to use weapons if you want to use weapons, or if you want to just do pure racing. I actually turned on the camera shake. I know by default it's turned off, but I turned it on, and I when I play racing games, be it simulation, arcade, or anti-gravity, I like doing first-person mode, and a lot of people tell me, like, that's crazy, you're going to get motion sickness. Yes, I am. But it immerses me. It immerses me in the experience. And it's like, I was playing it before we hopped on the call. I was playing it all day yesterday, and I'm like, man, this is taking me back. This is really taking me back.
It's the price of entry, but the more you play, the more you get used to it. And that first-person perspective offers something that you just don't get when you're, in third person. You're a little detached. Mm-hmm. So motion sickness is more of a thing. You see less of the area around you, but it is the experience you want.
Plus, it literally makes you feel like you are in the cockpit of the anti-gravity vehicle, because, like, literally, like, I'm over here, like, I can't blink. There's a turn coming up. I cannot. Oh, crap, I blinked. I hit the wall.
Especially if you're in elite mode. Yeah, do not blink.
Oh, man.
Oh. That is pure control.
So, furthering our talks about PACER, the other thing that I'm really impressed with, because I've played other anti-gravity games that have come along within the last couple of years, and one issue that has always been prevalent, like, some kind of get the controls right, some don't, but you guys nailed it straight on the head. Like, the controls are super responsive, they're tight. Like, if I need to press L2 or R2 for additional turn control, it's on the money. The boost works effortlessly. The shield to, the being able to pick up shield power-ups or weapon power-ups is just effortless. And I like the fact of the pure exhilaration of speed, and I don't have that feeling of when I'm accelerating too much that I'm losing control. And that's one of the things I feel like, when it comes to anti-gravity games, a lot of other developers don't nail that aspect of, even if you're going super fast beyond the speed of sound, you still need to be able to feel like you have a sense of control. And you guys nailed that.
Thank you. It's an awkward thing to get. So we say control. There are kind of two definitions in that. The first being what you're referring to, which is responsiveness. You press a button and the action happens, and that feedback is instant. The second is kind of getting your ship around the course, which is the big challenge of the whole thing. The more speed you get, the less control you have in that sense. So we wanted to kind of ratchet up the speed as much as possible to see and allow players to kind of draw that line for themselves. How much speed can they have and maintain control in terms of actually winning the game? Kind of blurring that line between input and action in the game should be avoided where possible. Players always respond better to more responsive controls, and to steer away from that winds up making the player feel clumsy, which obviously we don't want. You're a space pilot. You're heading at thousands of kilometers an hour. So you're not going to be clumsy. You're not going to be slow. You're going to be perfectly tuned for it.
And obviously you've got the different speed classes, and then all of the tuning options available to tighten the controls up and the speed even further.
Yeah, because I know like my favorite craft that I'm using is the Vixen craft,
Okay.
and it gives me that perfect balance of being able to race aggressively and also have the defensive capabilities of being able to take hits. You know, if my opponents, or if I'm playing online or locally, if I take damage or if I'm colliding into a wall, like it's also just easier to steer. And I like the weapon selection that you guys have. You can, select disruptive, you can select the defensive, you can select long range. It's the versatility there is like no two people are going to have the same exact experience. So it's like endless replayability.
That was a big thing that we wanted when we started out. Like, not only do we want that cool experience of flying a ship at hundreds, thousands of kilometers an hour, but for players to be able to express themselves as they race, not just in how their ship looks, but also in how that ship handles and how that ship interacts with other ships on the track.
Cool. So as far as like is there going to be for next generation, like is there going to be a performance difference between, say, from PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5 or Xbox One? Well, let's just say the One series. The One series to the
Series X.
Series X.
So I don't even call it
naming,
Xbox anything. It's just Series X.
That naming convention.
So, in a word, yes. Obviously the Xbox version is now coming up to the point where we're going to be submitting to Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
So it's looking early next week, finally. Thank God. The PS4 version runs on PS5 natively. Yep. And what the PS5 is doing is it's emulating the PS4 version. So what it's effectively doing is it's taking the PS4 Pro settings and running that. So what we've been able to see at the moment is even in emulation mode, it's only using half the GPU available. So we're very hopeful. We haven't started yet. We're just about to start the process of upgrading to the latest GDK from Microsoft and also the latest version of Unreal, which only just dropped yesterday. And then we'll start looking at the updates, the patches, really for both consoles. So can we run this at 120 frames per second? Well, we're comfortably running at 60. And at 60 frames, it's locked currently on PS5. And as I say, we're only using half the resource and it's being emulated. So we're incredibly hopeful that it will run at 120, pretty much locked on the new console platforms. That's the hope. We don't know yet, but the initial figures that we can see just from PS5 emulation looks good for us in the in the long term.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I've tested it on because I have the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4 Pro. Yes, I have the Pro. Why did I forget that? I've literally been almost exclusively playing on next gen consoles. So it's like when I go back to playing PlayStation 4 or Xbox Series X. Oh, that's it.
Xbox One X.
One X. God, that naming convention, Microsoft.
Yeah.
Drop Xbox from the beginning. It'll be a lot easier to remember.
Oh my goodness.
It's One X or Series X.
You know what's actually funny is I was in a Best Buy the other day and I was overhearing like a parent trying to get the Series X for their kid. They're like, I want that Xbox X. And then the person's like, the One X or the Series X, the Series S, the One S.
Which one?
They're like, the one with the X in it. And then I feel so bad because like,
do you want both of these then?
Because like the employee went and got the Xbox One X, and I walked over. I was like, if you're looking for the new one, it's this the Series X. It's sold out everywhere. I'm like, don't buy that unless you want an older console. They're like, isn't this the the very new one? I'm like, no, it's not.
That should be the language used everywhere.
Did you read about when the pre-orders went live for Series X, and a whole bunch of people went on Amazon and bought Xbox One X's by mistake?
Mm-hmm. I saw that. I was like, I actually saw a bunch of people on Twitter like showing off. They're like, I got the new Xbox, and then they're showing their receipt with the One X, and I was like, yeah. Yeah, it's brand new. It's not opened.
Yeah, but it's not new.
I was actually mad with Amazon because like and I'm very thankful with Microsoft, and they sent me a review unit, but I had ordered one through Amazon because I didn't know at all I was going to get review units for both systems. So I ordered it, and then a week before launch, Microsoft's like, here's a tracking number. And I'm like, for what? They're like, okay, here's your system. Right. I didn't request one, but thank you. And then the week of launch, Amazon canceled. They did this to me and a bunch of other reviewers. They just straight canceled the Series X, and I think a lot of my other friends who get the PlayStation 5 get canceled too. And it's like, that's a whole mess. That whole situation was a mess.
So they oversold then, obviously.
Yeah. It was insane. But anyway, my story. Before I
you got your Microsoft, and you didn't get an Amazon package with your hopeful new console, and instead you got a can of like cat food or an air purifier, because that was happening over here.
I heard that. I was like, seriously?
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
My
they were swapping them out for like air purifiers and saying your package has been delayed. Yeah, being delayed while we just swap the air purifier out with your PS5. There you go.
I swear, like this, I've seen scalping really bad before, but this has got to be the worst I've ever seen scalping.
I think it's a mixture of new hardware and people trying to make money because of COVID.
Yeah,
they might have lost income other ways, and people are going to want this console. Go to this thing, get as many as we can, and we're going to make some money. And some of them are making money.
Yeah, I know some folks here in Hawaii. They're selling the PlayStation 5 for like $1,700, $2,000. I've seen the Xbox. I've seen the Series X.
Yeah,
there you go.
There we go. I've seen the Series X for like, $1,800, $2,300. And I'm like, who is actually going to pay this much money? But there are people that will.
Really?
Oh, yeah. There are people that just have all of the money, and it's that much less of a concern for them.
Well, they've got a lot of money if they're prepared to, to spend that much cash. I mean, I was saying to a friend of mine, the other day, when the PS2 came out, I was working with an artist on a project, and his brother, it hadn't come out in the UK yet. His brother imported one, and it cost him £1,000 because he had to have it when it came out. And this was God knows how many years ago now. So it's a lot of money anyway, but back in those days, it was even more a lot of money.
That was insane money back then.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, when I used to work in retail in the very early days when I started getting into the industry, and, back in the day of like the Sega Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo, I was working for Virgin at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was not long in London because I didn't live in London originally. And so we're in a recession. And back then, people were still coming in, and they weren't buying one Mega Drive game. They were buying 3, 4, 5 Mega Drive games. And, when Street Fighter first came out, and it wasn't in this country, it was like a Japanese import, and it was £100 for the people were paying £100 for the cartridge. So, recession or no recession, people still wanted, even if they didn't have the money, they would put the money on the credit card because of that. It's entertainment. Entertainment always sold through a recession.
Yeah.
And working in retail, that very much showed me what people's buying habits were.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
But $2,000 for a new console.
I know. But if you've got the money, like Carlton said, if you've got the money, or you just don't care about how much debt you're in, you're gonna pay for it.
I mean, with the issues the news systems have, which I've run into, I've run into more issues with my PlayStation 5 than my Series X.
Yeah,
and it's just because like the PlayStation 5, I run into it either having the database build error, or it's won't read the disk, or it just constantly resets itself, or it won't power on.
Oh, really?
And yeah. I did a quick video of it. I just uploaded it on YouTube, I want to say like a week ago. And I had so many people saying like, I'm having the same issue. And I'm like,
It's common at the launch of every platform. Like the first systems always have issues. But I think that's true of any kind of technology or digital media you get out into the public, because you've gone from having a dedicated team of like 20, 30, 50, 100 people testing it to all of a sudden hundreds of thousands worldwide. There are going to be some problems that are just missed because having the resources to test it that thoroughly is really, it's just not possible.
But having said that, you've got this whole social media battle between what's best. It's always been there, right? If it wasn't Spectrum and the Commodore 64 or the Atari ST and the Commodore Amiga, or I've got a Mega Drive and it's better than your SES, it's now the modern consoles. But what Microsoft have done very, very well, I think, again, like yourself, owning both of them, is the Series X boots up infinitely quicker than the PlayStation does, and it's not given me 1 second of problem, whereas really the PS5, I've not had as many problems as you. I've only had 2 issues. One, it crashed once before the last firmware update when I was playing Call of Duty. Just really hard froze to a point where the only thing to do was to pull the power out, because there was nothing else. I mean, I've never had a console crash like that on me ever.
Me neither. I went through that. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, that was a crash and a half, that one. It was like, oh my God, Call of Duty has bricked the console. And then the firmware update drops, and I'm downloading a game in the background. I'm not touching the console. It's literally just there downloading. And I walk out of the room, I come back in the room, and the console's off. And I'm thinking, I didn't switch that console off. Try and switch it on, didn't switch on, then switched on, and hard crash, rebuild database, send bug report to Sony. But that's the worst. That's the worst. I've not had it do any more than that.
It's and it's like, going back to what like Carlton said about the any new tech, you're gonna have these issues. Well, maybe not these specific issues, but you're gonna have issues in general with new tech. And it's funny because a lot of people that I know, they're like not doing like the tech reviews or the game reviews or anything like that. They're like, they saw my video and they're like, yeah, this is why you don't buy first gen of anything. And I'm like, okay, cool. But there are people like me that are tech heads that just, we want to play with the new stuff.
Yeah, like that is why they don't buy first gen things. Right. Everyone has their own reason for buying whenever they buy it.
I mean, we need it as early as we can get it. Development hardware we've got, but we need retail kit as well, because we need to see what's out there.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
But I think Microsoft have had a smoother entry definitely than PlayStation has. So it's going to be interesting over the next quarter to see how many more patches we get out from PlayStation, and if some of these major issues are absolutely sorted, so you've got a much smoother experience as well. But I was massively shocked at just the differences of boot up time between both consoles. You click the button on the Xbox from standby, and literally 1, 2, you're in the operating system. It's not the same with PlayStation, is it? It's like 5-6 times longer.
Yeah.
Even with the SSD technology. So
that's the other thing is like they both are 1 terabyte SSD, and you only get 600 on the PlayStation, and at least the Xbox gives you like 845 gigs. I'm like, I don't understand that.
It's the operating system, yeah.
But anyways, I'm looking forward to PACER coming to the Xbox, because that is my preferred. Series X. Drop the Xbox. Series X.
Series X.
I'm looking forward to, because the Xbox platform is my preferred platform for when I play racers or if I play multiplayer games in general, just because I feel it's a better interface. Typically, if I'm not playing Sony exclusives or various games for review, then I'm typically on my Xbox. That's just how I am. Yeah. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're an Xbox gamer. And I'm like, yeah, so is everyone else in the 360 era. But I'm definitely looking forward to it coming over there and just putting it through its paces, because I love this game. So you got so many different modes with PACER. You got quick play, career, online. You can go into garage and you can customize your car. If you go into quick play, you've got even another tier of different modes you can go through as well. Like, it's super multifaceted. It really is. Like, is there anything you guys left out? I'm trying to think. No, there isn't.
There's nothing that it appears we left out.
No.
But, like any game that you see released, there are going to be loads and loads of ideas that just did not make it. Whether that is time, whether that is budget, whether that is technology, or whether that is, we tried a couple of ideas and they didn't work out as we wanted. So there's always some stuff that could have gone in, but what went in is what we thought worked best and like best supported that game. And I think we've done all right there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's more than enough to keep people happy, not only on game modes, but also on the tracks. So you've got reverse, got night and day, obviously, and then you've got mirrored forward and back. And just because you've mastered one particular track going forwards, you try doing that reverse mirrored, and it's a whole new battle. And you've got the longevity of it's not just 14 tracks; it's exponentially more than that. It's times 8, isn't it? I think it worked out, Carlton.
14 times 8 minus 4. Freeway doesn't have a reverse variant, but that is. So my maths is always terrible when I do this. It's about 110 different versions of the tracks that you play through, and you have like constant leaderboards as well. So we have online leaderboards in the game. Whatever mode you are in, when you complete a lap, it will check to see if it's better than your leaderboard best time. And if it is, it'll submit it. So you are also constantly measuring up against everyone else that wants to play.
Speaking of, there's a couple of things like I definitely want to dive into as far as like the leaderboard as well as the online, but I definitely want to dive into the track selection, the way you guys came up with designing your tracks, because I love F-Zero, but F-Zero GX, those tracks at high speed.
Absolutely bonkers tracks.
Yes. I'm so glad you guys stuck with more of the WipeOut style, because it's like, man, if we were going max velocity, I don't think I could stay on. I could be like, sure. Oh crap, I'm off. I'm flying. So what was the deciding factor when you guys were deciding how to develop the tracks?
So did you want to take this?
Well, it's this kind of split because there was two different ways. There was everything that was Formula Fusion and pre-me coming in, and then I think when myself and Jason started working with the team, we probably changed up a couple of ways as to how we attacked it. So there is kind of two versions of this discussion. So I'll let Carlton go first.
Okay.
So to build on that, there were actually 3 different versions before yourself. So even within the Formula Fusion era, there was kind of a split. So there were 3 tracks that were fully developed before I came on. Those were Mannahatta, Niagara, and I'm trying to think of the other. It escapes me at this time. But no, you can kind of tell those tracks because they don't tend to bank as much. They tend to be slightly flatter, slightly calmer. Mm-hmm. I've come on in a design position, and worth saying at this point, the track tools that we use to develop them are artist-led. So they're artist tools. They use splines. They use an art package, which requires an artist to go through. Mm-hmm. So my influence in track development and design is more advisory than anything else. So I've come in, and then there have been a new set of tracks made. This included things like Fire Fury, Transatoll, Atlas Torres. That was the other one made before I turned up. Mm. And the second batch of Formula Fusion tracks, like Transatoll, Fire Fury, those tend to be more of what I called at the time circus tracks. So things that have, you going up walls, you have loops, you have inverted tracks, you have vertical climbs, things that kind of push the anti-gravity side of it a bit more, whilst not being anything too wild. Mm-hmm. Then Steve comes in, we have the PACER set of tracks, and this was done kind of half submission, half lottery. So the artist tools that we had were what we call red root tracks. Mm-hmm. So we could create a spline, which is essentially just a digital line that resembles what we want the track to look like. Then we decide for each point on this line, how wide do we want it to be? Do we want it to bank? And then we ship it out as we called it a red root because it was just essentially a red ribbon, bright red in the middle of a white featureless void. And it just allowed us to very, very quickly get a craft on the track and start racing. So we could prototype a track quite quickly, and we can see what works, what doesn't work. Is it fun? Is it what we thought it would be? If so, fantastic. We can build on this. If not, then maybe we can make an adjustment here or there. And that kind of iterative process was essential. And this is also where we started to see some of our wilder tracks. This is where we started to see tracks with splits in them, like in Sona Shahar. We saw jumps, like in Freeway and in Aguila. So it was, and again, having the tools that we did and the process we did, we had like a few people involved in this process. So we'd start out with just the ribbon. We give it to everyone on the team. Everyone plays it a little bit. Those that work, brilliant. Then we start blocking out little bits of environment. This is blocking out, I think is the term that you may have heard before. And for us, we called it white boxing because that is what it was. It was when we started with a red ribbon in a featureless void. Now we are starting to add track walls. We are starting to put large white cubes in the environment. So we can see, what are you going to look at more often? Are there bits in the environment that are going to obscure other parts of the track? And we can start to get more of a sense of what it will feel like, as opposed to how it will fly, as well as how it will fly. Then again, we iterate again. So have these new inclusions made a certain part too difficult? So if seeing the exit of this corner was essential for that corner to work, that's where we'd find out. This is also where we find things like our players looking at a certain object for a large amount of time. If so, brilliant. Make it a feature. Make it absolutely huge, detailed, shine lights on it, all that kind of good stuff. Then we take it into engine. We would start to develop it further. We'd come up with a theme. We'd come up with a layout. We'd start to fit it in the lore of the game. And again, that constant process of test, update, play again, and that was our process, and I think it's worked out really well. And you can see in those 3 distinct chunks of level development that we've kind of gotten comfortable with each section, and with the ideas of each section, and started to push the boat out a little further each time.
Okay. All right. I was going to say also, was it difficult? I know this isn't easy, but I kind of want to pick your guys' brain.
Ask away, please.
I guess from a design standpoint and a developer standpoint, maintaining that 60 frames per second consistently, because through every track that I've played through, which my favorite is like a Cosmodrome.
Oh, really?
That's my favorite track.
Right.
It's a good track.
Why is it your favorite track?
Just the sheer when you're just the way that track is, the layout, being able to just feel like it's just me in the track. Like I don't feel like I'm seeing anything else, because I think there's also the fog effect too. It's just, I don't know, like it's the most F-Zero like track, I guess you could say, in a way, without the insane I'm gonna fly off the I'm gonna make one mistake. That's one thing about F-Zero GX. Make one mistake, you're done.
Yeah. Harsh.
Too right. But it made you good. You had to get good in order to progress.
Well, that's controversial now. It's like everything needs an easy option.
That is an entire thing. That could be a podcast all in its own.
Life isn't easy. Yeah.
It isn't. But I understand the want for some to make it accessible. I understand, rewarding time invested as opposed to skill developed, and how one turns into the other. And I think it's not entirely true. We've seen the Demon Souls and Dark Souls have completely reignited difficulty, and have proven that things can be controller snappingly difficult, and people will still enjoy it. And I think that the best approach there is to make something that has a low entry bar and a high skill ceiling. Anyone can pick it up and play it and succeed at an earlier level. But if someone wants to go further, if someone really wants to put the speed up to the maximum, customize their car out, and go for the full challenge and really push themselves, then the game should allow that.
Yeah.
Sorry, you had a question to ask. I'm sorry, we got sidetracked.
And it was how difficult, I think, was it to reach 60 frames?
Yeah. See, now I want to cycle back on that, because every developer that I've had on the show, and I typically I'll ask this question. Sometimes I ask it offline about that aspect of game development, people being very forthright about, it needs an easy mode. These games need to be designed easier. And it seems like from a developer standpoint, it's like get good. But you can't outwardly say that because then that draws like, you know, so much ire. But it's weird to me because I'm like, every game I play, like, maybe it's because I'm an older gamer. I've been gaming for 30-something years. When I play a game, within 2 to 5 minutes, I understand the controls. I know what I need to do. The game has taught me how to play it. Where I'm looking at, this is controversial. I'm known for controversial statements, but I'm looking at modern gamers, the Fortnite gamers, the new gamers, and there are things that I've learned from 2D games that are applicable to modern ones. That modern gamers will just pick up and they'll be like, "Oh, I don't know how to do this," and I'm over here like, "This is fundamental gaming," you know, pattern memorization. Because that's so core. Like that's script. Like every AI is scripted to do certain things at certain points. And like playing older games like Double Dragon and you know, F-Zero with the rubber banding of the racers and stuff like that. It's like I have feelings about it. Get good. I'm gonna say it.
Remember those sentences. Because there's a whole bunch of ideas just flying around, and I have responses and whatnot. I'm sure Steve does as well. But back to the 60 FPS question, how difficult was that to get? And on a design side, I have less impact on that. Because a lot of the optimizations and a lot of the getting to that frame rate is mostly credit to programmers and artists. And the programmers and artists we have done a fantastic job. Absolutely amazing work. My job is, in that regard, is mostly to make things simple to understand as simple as possible for anyone else that has to implement it. And to think forward about the systems that are going to be implemented so that they don't need to be updated later in a way that is inefficient, that causes slowdown where it doesn't need to be. For the rest of the question, I'll pass it over to Steve because I think he may know a little more on this than I do.
Well, it was a journey. It was one hell of a journey. I mean, it's you know, frankly, it's to get a game running like this at 60 frames is hard enough. But I think the team would have had an easier job doing it, and it would have happened quicker if we hadn't had the legacy work to deal with. And I think when I joined September 18, Jason was already working through those legacy art issues where when the project started there was insufficient project management, technical management. The artists were allowed to just get off and do whatever the hell they wanted to do, so there wasn't somebody there saying, okay, you've only got this many polygons, you know, for this specific object, you know, the background objects can only have 1,000. And you know, I've been told stories where, you know, background objects that you couldn't see much detail on had hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of polygons. And so, you know, you would go back and you would read some of the reviews on Formula Fusion, and you know, people were bemoaning about how slow it was and what a supercomputer you needed just to make it go any decent speed. And it was because of, you know, there was just so much geometry trying to be drawn. It was just horrible. So really, I would say probably over half the job has been a cleanup process. And it's not been an easy cleanup process for Jason and any of the art team and any of the coders, really, you know, that came into the project, because they had to dig so deep and they were always finding, you know, another legacy issue. And so we were not only developing a product, but we in parallel were trying to fix all these legacy problems before we could actually get to the place where we wanted to get to. So we take a positive step forwards, 2 steps back, another step forward. So, if any of the guys that have been following the development of Formula Fusion are thinking, why did it take so damn long? You've been working it for ages. It's because the cleanup process was, like developing a whole new project as well as developing a whole new project. So to get to where we've gotten to, as it's mind blowing, really, and it's testament to the team and to a largely brand new group of guys to the industry at just how well they adapted and how much hard work they have done and time and effort they've put in to make sure that we got out the door what we wanted to achieve day and date, which was really 60 frames per second, not just 60 frames per second on the high-end systems, but we really wanted to try and push Xbox, which was the hardest one to achieve, and I'm talking about the very first one, and the base PlayStation, to try and keep at 60 frames as much as it possibly could. So it's been one hell of a journey, but it's good to it's good, and it's also a relief to look back and say, what, we did it. We really achieved what we set out to do. Because I know that the hoped for ship date when I joined was sooner than we were ever really going to get it out. And when I joined, just going back to what some of the things that Carlton was saying, we were still finishing the levels. So I think Sanashahar was in the last week or two of development. Ajora hadn't been started, and Leica hadn't been started either. So we still had those. And when you looked at the new levels and you looked at the old original 8 levels from Formula Fusion, it looked like 2 completely different products. Wow. So it was a decision had to be made of, there's no way you can ship the game like this. You can't just ship the new levels, which are just so much visually better than the old levels. We need to go through every single one of the old levels, and we need to bring them up to the same level as the new levels. And we've kind of got to do that job anyway, because we've still got to go and clean up all of these other levels to try and get them running at 60 frames on all the consoles. So that made the amount of work exponentially bigger than I think what the original hope from the investors was. Can we just finish up and get it out? No, because you're gonna hurt the product. We've got to make it look like a complete product, from the ground up. And this was another reason, or one of the core reasons why we changed the name, is because otherwise you want to go back out to review, for example. You go back out as Formula Fusion, people have reviewed Formula Fusion, you're stuck, you're screwed, you're not going to get any more coverage. So, you rebrand it, and you do as much of the rewriting as we've done. So rewriting the physics, the handling, the AI, and what you've got is really pretty much a new product. Yes, you've still got the original 8 tracks from Fusion, but when you look at it as a whole, it's pretty much a product from almost the ground up. And luckily, the press saw it that way when we first showed it to them and announced it, April last year.
Okay. Yeah, because that's definitely one of the things. If you were to release a game that has a lot of fundamental issues, and then you're working to fix it, that once the public has that perception stuck in their mind, it's like you can't get rid of it. It's like you look at games like No Man's Sky, for example, which is phenomenal now, but a lot of people still hold on to 2016 No Man's Sky, which, it's like, I tell a lot of my friends, like, guys, just play it. Please play it.
Yeah. Just play it.
It is very difficult to shed a reputation.
Yeah.
I mean, what we saw both in the US, we did a lot of touring last year, me and Carlton, with the game, and what we saw in the US from people that have played Formula Fusion, again over here in the UK and in Europe as well, was people that had Fusion that then played PACER, just night and day. They're like, wow, what a change. This is just so much better. And it's like, great, get out and tell everyone you know.
So, speaking of which, like, I wanted to ask, and I typically ask a lot of the developers that come on, like, is it difficult trying to cater your game? Like, I guess when you're developing it, like, are you trying to cater to like a certain demographic, like to say the UK audience or the US audience, or just universally? Is it difficult? Like, is there how people respond to it in different, geographically? Is it different, or is it just universal praise thus far that you guys have?
Well, on a design side with something like this, you've really only got Europe and you've got the American markets, and then you've got the Asian markets. So the only time when you're really changing anything is for the Asian markets. You may want to do something specific for that market, but typically within a racing genre, it's probably not that much. So shipping this out for the US and Europe, you're not really doing it anything different. And I mean, we have European teams, we have American teams within the games anyway. So we're kind of going out for that demographic. But what we were looking for was more so about how people felt about the controls. How did they feel about the tracks, etc. Truth be told, even if they didn't like the tracks, there was nothing that we could do about it, but we could change the handling. There was other aspects of the design that Carlton was getting feedback on, and with the power-ups for the weapons, through the ship upgrades, etc. All of that was great feedback that Carlton could then take away and then iterate on when we got back to base. So that was hugely useful. We did get a lot of positive comments about what they were playing, but also what if you try this and what if you tried that, and we took a lot of ideas back from the public as well, and then tried to do as much as we could within the time frame that we had, because it's not you design a game and you've got to be very careful that you don't really design a game in a bubble. There are certain things that you will get right, but there's certain things and maybe many things that you'll just get wrong. And at the end of the day, when it leaves the studio, the product is it's a game of the people. So you want to make sure that you're delivering something that the people want, because if you don't, you're dead. You've got no sales anyway.
Yeah.
You're delivering them a game that you wanted to play, but nobody else did. So hey, what's the point? So you've got to be very, very careful, and you've got to always think about that when you're going through the whole development process.
Okay. As far as like the online infrastructure, like thus far it's very smooth. Was that difficult? Because I know for some games it's difficult trying to have a smooth online infrastructure, as well as on top of having 60 frames per second. Like that's very difficult. Like how, I guess either hard or how difficult was that building that online infrastructure?
Insanely difficult. Absolutely insanely difficult. It was more difficult for us as a team because Chris Hull, who did a lot of that work, it was the very first time that he was going through it. So, as such, he was learning how to do this, more so for the consoles. He'd done it on PC, he'd not done it on the consoles, and there's a whole lot of work that you have to do in and around, online for Xbox and online for PlayStation, and working, with their APIs as well. So, that was it was an insanely difficult job. Not only that, we literally only had 2 people doing the online part of the game.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so we had Chris and we had George, and George Manjit was not even full time. So again, we might be seen on to labor the point we're a tiny team, but we were an insanely tiny team. So if you go back and you look at any other major title that we might be put alongside, and you see how many people develop the online. It's you might have 10 people on the online team. No, we're 2. So, you're trying to do a single player game and an online player game. And an online player game is like a whole new separate development, that kind of sits alongside that. And Chris is trying to do that and do the work that he needed to do for standard single player as well. So again, it just goes to show, the amount of work that had to be done, the stress that the whole team was under. And again, sit back and just go, how the hell did these guys do it? How did we achieve that with both these people?
Magic.
Yeah. Yeah,
magic and hard work.
Yeah, hard work and lots of trauma for free. Yeah.
So what is the likelihood of cross-platform play, and how difficult would that be to implement?
It's something we've not looked at in a while. We were in discussion with Sony about it summer last year, and when I say discussion, it was, hey, are you making this available yet? No. So until Sony allowed platform play, and you had the capability in Unreal, because we're on Unreal, it's like, well, our hands are completely tied. The only way that we could do it with cross-platform through Xbox and PC, but again, with such a tiny team, it's something we just didn't have time to do, and we're not looking at it now because, again, we don't have time. We've essentially got, now the game is out, we've got 3 projects within the PACER universe that is going on. One of which we haven't announced. The other one is the game is out there and we're patching it. We did 4 patches alone, like in November. We've got another patch launching next week, and we've got the next gen versions. So you've got just keeping up with the game, improvement, bug fixes, and next gen. So two out of 3 projects is, I'm doing look across platform right now.
The team has not swollen in that time. It is the same size team that we are working with.
Yeah.
As far as like the I guess the from a marketing standpoint, like has the marketing approach been highly effective for you guys, like with social media, with like YouTube promotions and whatnot? Like, has it been easy? Because I know when you're diverting the like primarily all of your team to the development and the online, like how much time and people and resources do you have to put towards like PR?
Well, I had to build a publishing team from nothing for this project as well. So that was another job and I wasn't expecting to do that when I signed on for this. So we had to basically find and hire PR companies around the world. So when we started PR last year, we had UK PR, French PR, German PR, American PR, and Latin American PR. When we came back into launch this year, we just stuck with UK PR, German PR, handled the French PR ourselves, American and Latin American PR. And we got a social media guy on board as well, and a marketing team as well to help. So it's never easy launching a new project. It's never easy launching a new project at this time of year. We're a brand new IP. We're launching in a month where you've got the brand new consoles coming out, new software around the consoles, and you are in sales heaven for the consumer. There's so much choice, and most of it's on, being cut down to 30, 50, or even 70%. So you're fighting through a lot of noise. Now, the upside is we got support on Sony's YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel has performed well. Our social media has performed well. I think in a week when we did the launch video, we had over 1 million people pretty much see that video. And sales have been good, but they haven't been to a level we were hoping. But I think we all can be realistic and say, look at the time of year we're at. So we're hoping now towards the end of December, when we come into like the Steam sales, etc. That's when all the noise is pretty much gone. Cyberpunk is out in 6 days. So, by the time the Steam sale hits on the 22nd of December, we should have a lot more clarity. I know through speaking to a number of other publishers, a number of other publishers had actually pulled a number of their digital titles and pushed them into next year because there's just too much noise. We weren't in a position where we had the option to do that. We needed to, get the game out in the market, get the marketing started, and start getting the sales going, for the business. So we've still got a lot of work, and there's going to be a lot more marketing coming up from us through and into the Q1 next year. We're just really starting the process in working with the influencers and the streamers. So there'll be a lot more social media presence coming up through the rest of the year and into Q1 than there has been, with a real focus on really starting to get the online ecosystem built out, because that's the long tail of the game. We want to be able to get as many people online playing as we possibly can. We've had approaches from a number of esports companies as well, which were in the early stages of going through. So there is a lot to do.
Okay. Yeah, because it's one of the things, like, sometimes when I speak to gamers, and it kind of blows my mind how a lot of gamers are unaware of the behind the scenes aspect of it, because the marketing, like, you can make the best game out there, but then you gotta do the marketing aspect, and a lot of people think that the marketing is super simple. Make a couple, social media posts and that's it. And I'm like, no, I have a background in marketing, and I'm like, no, you're in a PR firm. You got to come up. You've got to hit your certain, certain CPMs, your headlines. You've got to do all this stuff, and it is not easy at all. No. It is not, especially when it's a new IP or a new product, trying to get that out to the public. There's a lot of things you have to utilize. Like, people are they're gonna question, like, what is this game like? And you have to say, oh, it's like this, it's like that, but it's better than both. But this is the point, the tangible point for the end consumer, and it's stressful.
It is, and it's during COVID. I mean, COVID has added, I'd say, probably a horrible twist to how marketing happens, and how it's made a tough job exponentially harder. I mean, if you think you'll go to a show, I mean, I can't remember all the numbers, but at the beginning of our tour, we did Austin, South by Southwest last year.
Yeah.
I think I can't remember if we were there for 2 or 3 days, Carlton. But I seem to remember, like, over that time, we'd clocked up, I think, over 500 people playing the game. And it didn't matter where we went, people were genuinely excited about the game. And, in the US, most people went, my God, a new F-Zero, thank God, thank you. Very, few people would mention WipeOut, whereas you get over in Europe, and obviously it was more WipeOut. But that's the beginning of kind of like your PR and your social media campaign. But it doesn't tick all the boxes. It doesn't get you seen in the same way as a number of the real top YouTubers and people on Twitch will get you. That is where the kind of marketing and the sales have gone largely. And not being able to meet those guys during this year, I think it's been even tougher. And that's where Aaron, who leads up our social media, has played a role, because he knows a lot of these guys. But it's not the same as meeting them, having them meet the team, play the game with the team. It's still all very, very hands off. But the kind of history lesson that I was going to make on other titles, there's another game I read about, Human Fall Flat, right? I think it was a one guy developer, and he got the game into the market, and it did nothing. And it literally just limped for, I think, the best part of a year. And it really only started getting going because of the influencers. So he started going out to the influencers, the guys that didn't have very many views. More and more of these guys picked it up, which then got the attention of other guys that had much bigger views. They then picked it up. And at that point, it then started running away. And look where it is now. It's done phenomenal number of units and phenomenal income, for all involved. So, some games come out and they're not overnight successes. They might take 3, 6, 12 months to really get traction. But I think COVID has made that even harder than what it has been. And further evidence of that has been with everything going online. So like, I think IGN did an online show. All the shows have been online. We haven't done any of them because the initial shows that ran were deemed to be failures. And I think every show that's run this year, there's been hardly anybody that's turned up to these online shows. So again, you've missed out on a lot of hands-on experience for the consumer this year, which has meant online has become even more critical to you getting seen. But online is, again, it's there's just so much information, there's so much choice.
It makes me think of when Jeff Keighley and a bunch of other influential people in the gaming industry were saying, like, there's no need for E3. We can just do the Summer of Games thing that they did and all this other stuff. And I'm over here listening to other gamers who are like, yeah, we don't need E3. We don't need this. And I went to E3 last year. I was flown there by PDP. And I tell people, physically being at a convention for gaming and tech versus watching it on YouTube or Twitch, worlds apart.
Yeah.
You will not replace that hands-on experience.
Exactly.
Never. That's why they still exist. They will come back after all of this COVID stuff is over.
Yeah.
And that's why they get set up in the first place.
In some capacity, but let's not even go into E3 and what the hell's got to happen there.
There is no way of knowing what's going to happen there, but you're right. Nothing is going to replace that physical presence, that hands-on experience. Not just of directly meeting someone responsible for the development of your title, not just being able to get your hands on an early version and experience what it's like yourself, but also the community that comes together and the culture that builds up around these events.
And one of the last few questions I have for you guys is, I want to know, how has trying to work on and develop a game and publish it, get it out there during this pandemic, how has COVID negatively impact you guys in your work? Has it pushed the game back from whatever the initial launch date was, or how I'd like to ask that, because I think also some fans may not even realize that, yes, COVID is impacting the gaming industry. Yes, that's why a lot of games are getting delayed. There's a lot less people to work on titles because they can't be at their office. A lot of people are having to remotely work. But in your own words, sorry, I went on my little tangent. Gamers frustrate me, and I love them at the same time.
Do not apologize. They are a frustrating and contrary breed. Should I say we? Did you want to go first, Steve, or?
Well, it'll be interesting to get Carlton's take on this. But I think for me, I'm always of the belief that you can't do everything remotely, and now we're at a stage where we have to. So I think in for certain things that we were doing, where we needed a team in the office, where we were doing optimization, it would have been really good to have the team there with all the hardware, so we could all see it. Because again, we've got a situation where with the development kit, we had what we needed internally, but we didn't have enough once we all left the office. So some of us have got dev hardware and some of us don't. And for those that don't, when we need to look at something, it's a pain in the ass. So yeah, it's slowed, it has slowed things down to a certain degree, and it has made things, I think, more laborious. Because again, even if you're doing a screen share using Skype's not particularly great at being able to show you all the detail when you're trying to, look at something, when you need to look at something for what it is. But apart from that, I think I've missed the interaction of just having the physical team in a space. It's not the same getting on Discord, every day and being stuck at home, as well, because we've had a ton of work to do and we've not been allowed out with, lockdown, but it just felt very much as though that was all there was. You were just working all the time. And we've had an exponential amount of work to get through anyway, so we didn't have a choice. But I think overall it has made it tougher than it would have ordinarily been if we'd have still been in the office space. But Carlton, what's been your takeaway?
Well, my takeaways on some of the limitations will be much the same as yourself. So it is a limitation on hardware. That process of feedback becomes slower because it, as you say, it isn't just, I've done this thing, please walk 2 meters to my desk and take a look. And I can't just stand up, walk over to your desk and have a look either. It is, I have to take a screenshot or a video or start a video call, which is, as Steve rightly said, inferior, but necessary, and then send it off and then wait for whoever's on the other end to see it, to view it, to ask to give their feedback. And if they have any questions, then the whole cycle starts again. They send the question back to me, then they have to wait for me to see it, to understand it, to finish whatever task I was doing, and then respond. So the feedback process is slower. The psychological part of it, as you say, not having everyone in that same space, not having that same kind of sense of camaraderie amongst the people you work with, is a step down. It is a far less social environment. It's a bit more sterile in that sense, but it has not been as bad as it could have been. Because one, we had a lot of systems in place for working remotely. So things like remote repositories, things like remote communication. We're familiar with programs like Zoom and Discord and Skype already. We use them in our free time. So there's no onboarding process required there. So we were able to get up and running very quickly with that. And this is one of the few things that having a small team is very useful for. We were able to, having a smaller team, we are much more agile. We're able to adapt much faster. So if a new process goes out, if a new program is implemented, you only need to explain that to 7 or 10 people. If you need to explain that to 100 people, it's going to take so much longer because, again, more people need to pick it up. There are fewer people to explain it. And everyone needs to get up to speed before work can begin in earnest. Having a smaller team has allowed us to be much more flexible and adaptable in that sense. So it has slowed us down, but the team has, as it usually does, taken that change very well.
Okay. My last question to you guys is, for anyone who, at this point, if you're not convinced them picking up PACER, I don't know what you're doing with your life. But anyways, if you had to leave the audience with why they should pick up and play PACER, what would it be?
Ooh, that is a good question. I would say because well, of course I'm going to say this. I'm biased. I helped create it. There are not many other experiences like it. Mm-hmm. It is, if you've wanted to, if you've enjoyed that kind of twitchy, edge of your seat, pure focus that comes with trying to solve the puzzle of getting around a circuit at a very, very high speed, mm-hmm. that precision that's required, and then there aren't many games, there aren't many experiences that will offer it and will let you look good when you do it.
Yeah.
You can take it as far as you want. Like, we've built an experience that allows you to be that, ace pilot with super fast reflexes and pure control at your fingertips. And we can, if you want to go further with that, you absolutely can. You want to build your own ship, then, well, kind of. You can. There's a lot of challenge in there. Like, the game can go as far as you can, and I am genuinely proud of it. I think it is a brilliant experience to have. Go onto YouTube. There are videos of it. Read the reviews, and people will tell you, that, as you say, it works well. It feels great, and that is why you should go in. It offers that fantasy.
Yeah.
And it's probably skill-based racing, skill-based arcade racing at its best, with with a massive amount of depth, with the ability to upgrade the ship and the weapons, and online. Online is the long tail of the game. You get on and get 9 other friends involved and have some amazing fun flying around, shooting the hell out of each other, and try and climb up those worldwide leaderboards. Try and beat Angry Man. God damn, you're going to have to be good if you're going to beat Angry Man, because he is something else. But yeah, it's just trying to, it's that thing of just trying to better your time, be the best pilot, be better than your next best friend. And just having an insane fun, at the same time. There was something that used to run called, I think it was called War Wednesdays in the early stage. So I know the guys are talking about trying to do something like that again, just mass online multiplayer. Mm-hmm. But I've seen videos of that back in the early stages, and just everyone's just having insane fun. I mean, those, I think a great takeaway is, day 1 and day 7 retention. We're tracking the numbers every day. We're getting like up to 50% retention rate on the game. People that are buying it are staying in the game. They are loving it. They're playing for up to 2 hours, in one sitting. How many games of this ilk are really captivating people and keeping them in the game that long? So I think more than anything, that says it all. People that are buying the game are loving the game, and they're spending a lot of time in the game.
Okay.
The simplest and best way I can put it, it's fun.
Yeah, it's great fun.
All right. Well, I actually lied. I have one final question for you guys.
Go for it.
Did you have fun today?
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us on.
If you get the opportunity to be on the podcast, by all means, accept it. It is great fun. Thank you, Mikhail. You've been a wonderful host.
Thank you. And we definitely have to do this again. I definitely have to have you guys back on if you guys to be interested.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Absolutely. Just drop us an email. I will make the time for you.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
And where can people find you guys on the social medias and everything like that?
Well, that's a good question, actually. So the website is pacergame.com. Mm-hmm. And it's R8 Games on Twitter and Facebook.
And Instagram.
And Instagram and YouTube. Yeah, so go and look for R8 Games on YouTube.
Okay. I'll leave links to all of that down in the description below for the podcast. So whether you're watching this on YouTube or watching this on Twitch, or you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or anything like that, the links for everything will be available for you guys to click on. And go pick this game up. If you're not playing this and you're into anti-gravity racers, then I don't know what you're doing with your life. You should pick this up. It's a lot of fun, especially if you've got that itch to play something that literally is the best amalgamation of F-Zero and WipeOut, which we have not had that. I mean, there have been titles that have come out that were overhyped. They didn't live up to that hype. This far exceeds any hype that could possibly be there. Plus, I'm going to be reviewing it, so y'all, I know you guys love my reviews, so that's going to be out. It's going to be detailed. I'm going to cover it. I'm going to be streaming it as well. And you guys can catch this episode of the podcast. It'll be available on youtube.com/Mikhail Kasanova, as well as twitch.tv/Mikhail Kasanova, and on every major podcasting outlet and I have to list them off so I don't forget the order: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and now recently we are on Amazon Music. Amazon reached out to us to get the show on there, so we're over there as well. And probably soon coming to Podcast One when they decide. I don't know. The Podcast One thing is taking so long. It's taking so long.
You'll make it, I believe.
The thing is, it's like Podcast One is so interesting. So they're my hosting site for my podcast. So the thing is, now it's like it's open invite to use them as a hosting site, but they initially reached out to me to get my show in there. I was on another hosting site. I went over to theirs, and they're like, yeah, we're going to put your show on Podcast One. That was a year ago. I'm like, all right.
How about that?
It's like, so how about that? Is that happening anytime soon? Crickets. All right. Yeah. Great answer. So, eventually it will be there.
Let's hope you get there.
Fingers crossed.
You'll make it.
So with that being said, Steve, Carlton, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute blast. It does not feel like we've been talking for an hour and a half.
No, it doesn't, does it? Not really.
It doesn't.
Where did that go?
Time flies when having fun.
It's almost time for Chinese. Yeah.
But hey, we're definitely gonna have to do this again. I would love to have you guys back on the show, and I'm looking forward to everything you guys are working on in the future, and let's definitely be staying in touch.
Oh, please do. I've enjoyed the show. I'm looking forward to the review. I listened to a couple other episodes of your podcast on Spotify before starting here, and I've subscribed. I'm staying tuned in.
Thank you. And with that being said, this is myself, Carlton, and Steve. We are all saying out. You guys have a great one. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I hope it was informative, engaging, and you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you go ahead and leave a rating and a review. It greatly helps out the podcast and helps the platforms that we're on go ahead and promote us more so that more people can check it out. And if you're wondering what all platforms we're on, aside from what you've listened to it on, we're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. And if you want to support the podcast, then we've got Patreon, so patreon.com/Mikhail Kasanova, which allows us to continue doing what we're doing. If you're looking for this in video format, we're also available on twitch.tv/Mikhail Kasanova, as well as youtube.com/Mikhail Kasanova. So with all that being said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast and the #1 podcast in the Pacific, the Kasanova Podcast. You have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.